Today's lesson is about leadership, leadership in our homes, our society, and churches. When you look into the world today, you see chaos, and I believe it's because of a lack of leadership. Leadership begins in the home. So go with the home, so go with the nation, so go with the home, so go with the church. We're going to be discussing the aspects of a leader, qualities of a leader: courage, integrity, humility, patience, pride, which is the opposite of humility, and confidence. The first one we're going to be discussing is courage, to do something in spite of fear. In Acts 9, 10 through 11, God charges Ananias to go teach Saul, on how to become a Christian. Ananias is afraid. This man that has been persecuting Christians, you want me to go teach him? Yes. So Ananias musters the courage to go teach Saul, how to become a Christian because it is what God wanted. Again, in Acts 4, 8 through 11, Peter stands up to the Pharisees and says, "Whom you crucified." You got to remember that Peter denied Christ 3 times. He was afraid. And then he mustered the courage to tell the Pharisees, "Whom you crucified." That took courage. Eden Brock once said, "For evil to succeed, it only needs good men to do nothing." Muster the courage, men. Let's not be the men that did or do nothing. Moving on. Integrity. What does it mean to have integrity? The quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. The Bible is full of those. The entire book of Job. Job had integrity from the beginning to the end, and he was rewarded for it, standing on his strong moral principles of what God taught him. Also in Daniel 3, 17 and 18, with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They stood on their moral principles, knowing that God was going to save them from the fiery furnace. He did. Another way of looking at integrity, it is what you do when no one else is looking. Let's say your boss tasks you to do a job and there's no one else around. Fill in a hole or something. But there's no one else around to inspect your work. Are you just going to cover it up? Or are you going to do it right, though? That's integrity. How do we develop integrity in the word that we have today, in the God's written word? 2 Timothy 2:15 tells us to study. To study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. The next one we're going to speak about is humility. The quality of having a modest or low value of one's importance. In John 3, 1 through 17, I think is the greatest example that we can have. Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. Why did he do this? To show them that it's not beneath him, as a great leader he was and is, to wash the feet of those who follow him. And again in Acts 4, 8 through 11, when Peter denied Christ, but he was humble enough to realize it and come back and point out to the Pharisees that you hung Christ on the cross. Unlike Judas in Acts 1, 18 and 19. When Judas hung himself, Judas didn't admit that he was wrong. He just went and ended his life. Peter admitted that he was wrong. He was humble. The application for us as leaders today to be humble is to put others before yourself. As a leader in the home, as a father, as a husband, your children and your wife should always come before yourself. Their needs should always outweigh your own. Unless you're prideful. Of course, the next one we're going to talk about is pride. A definition of pride is a feeling of deep satisfaction for one's own achievements. That's not being humble. That's putting yourself before others. You've heard the phrase that pride cometh before the fall. I believe that is wrong. In Proverbs 16:18, pride comes before destruction. A hardy spirit comes before the fall. If you have pride, you're going to destroy your home. If you have pride, you're going to destroy the relationships you have with the brethren in the church. Swallow your pride. Why should we not be prideful? I'm going to leave that question up to you, because only you can answer it. Pride destroys families, destroys churches. And if you look in the world today, pride destroys nations. The next one we're going to talk about is patience. The definition for patience: the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, problems, or suffering without becoming annoyed or anxious. I'm a mechanic by trade. And when I think of the word capacity, I think of how full something can be. You can only put so much oil in an engine or so much gas in a gas tank. Capacity. Well, as leaders, we shouldn't have a capacity only being so full or so tolerant. We should have an ability to deal with annoyances or things that may make us anxious. We have to have an ability because it has to be endless. In Genesis 6:13 through 22, Noah waited over 100 years for it to rain. He was patient. He was willing to wait because God said it was coming. But on the other side, impatience. Abraham and Sarah didn't wait. They didn't wait for a child. Or King Saul in 1 Samuel 8 through 15. He didn't wait on Samuel, and it cost him his crown. As husbands, when our wives come to us, even though it's been a long day and you're annoyed by what's going on in the world or at your job or with a friend, if she has something to say, be patient and listen. When your child needs when your child needs some of your time, take the time to listen. A moment of patience and a moment of rage saves you 100 moments of regret. One moment of patience may ward off great disaster. One moment of impatience may ruin a whole life. Take it from someone that knows. Be patient. The next one we're going to speak of is confidence. What is the definition of confidence? Belief that one can rely on something, someone, or something. Paul's entire life, from beginning to end, was full of confidence. Before, he was confident in persecuting Christians. He thought he was doing what was right. After he met the Lord on the road to Damascus, he realized that it wasn't right. But after he was saved, he was confident in his journeys all the way to Rome that he was doing what was right. He was doing God's work. How do we become confident? And like Paul was confident. 2 Timothy 2:15 again tells us to study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman needeth not to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. In conclusion, how do you harden steel? My boys and I, we like to forge out knives. You take steel, you stick it in a forge, it comes out red hot, you beat it on an anvil, and you make a knife. But how do you harden that steel? You have to first put it in the fire before you can quench it in the oil. As men, as leaders, we have to go through the fire before we can become hardened. Or diamonds. How are diamonds formed? Under great force. We must endure great force, men, before we can become hardened. April 23rd, 1910, Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech. Some of you may know it. It's the Man in the Arena speech. When it speaks of leadership, I want to quote a piece of that now. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually serve, who act, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows in the end triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Thank you.